When Millsaps asked me to do a talk on the movement of education in the state of Mississippi, my first response was laughter. And my second response was thinking of all the complaints that people have about education in the state of Mississippi. Honestly, it's obvious where the state of Mississippi wants to go, wants to move education-wise. By 2025, with the Mississippi Succeeds plan, the Mississippi Department of Education hopes to increase student achievement, hopes to increase graduation rates, hopes to increase early childhood literacy, and using data, hopes to get student school districts up to a C or greater. So that's the plan for MDE at the very least. But with that plan in mind, you have to ask yourself, what is everyone complaining about as it concerns Mississippi education? And at Ole Miss, I studied classics. I got my degree in Latin. As you can tell, I'm totally rich, right? I'm a journalist with a Latin degree. And one of the funniest complaints I've ever heard was, "O tempora, o mores," by Roman consul and lawyer Cicero, Marcus Tullius Cicero, if you're nasty, right? And so Cicero gave this exclamation, "Oh, the times, oh, the customs," and it's so dramatic, right? It's so extra. It's like, "Oh, children, oh, this, oh, that." Actually, he was talking about someone he thought wanted to kill him. But with that explanation, you can hear the condemnation of the times in which he lived. And that, of course, is always uttered with a heavy, noble sigh that accompanies. It is all of your responsibility for the culture in which you participate, in your participation in it, and the ways that you help from it. But Cicero, I'm fond of him. I'm fond of men who are good with words. If ancient Rome were the rap game, Cicero would be Quavo. If you guys don't know Quavo, he's the Migo. He's the Beyonce of the Migos. If you don't know Beyonce, don't talk to me, don't touch me. I am on loan from the Beehive. I will put a bee under your Instagram pictures, like, no problem. But the reason that I'm here today is to talk to you about privilege. The reason that I can bat around references to ancient Rome and Beyonce is because I am a product of the Mississippi public education system. I went to Head Start in Canton, Mississippi. I went to Ridgeland Public Schools in the Madison County School District, where I beasted, by the way. I went to Ole Miss. I went from 2011, and I paid for my degree in 2016. I finished classes in 2015. And so my entire life, I've been a product of Mississippi public education. And many people would look at me and tell you that I sort of count as a success story. I grew up as the child of 2 teen parents, a boy who now, as a man, still plucks the cobwebs of the prison industrial complex from his shoulders. A girl who grew up to become the greatest mom that ever could be, and who, like so many Black women, shoulders this incredible, unfair endurance and strength that's required of her. So I'm honest about myself. My poverty wasn't the same poverty of so many poor Black children who grew up in rural Mississippi. I had books in my house growing up. So though I was poor with 2 teen parents, one who went to juvie soon after I was born, I still had early childhood literacy. And that gives me the opportunity to stand in front of you today sounding like the nice white lady that I talk like. You know what I mean? And so I really, really stick on that honesty about privileges because Mississippi has to be honest too. I know you guys are aware of the fact that Mississippians are wonderful deflectors, whether it's from ownership or trying to push ownership of those sins across to somebody else. So when someone complains to me about Mississippi, I'm like, listen, I got this handled. I'm down on poverty. I totally get it, right? I'm invested in this. But then you have other Mississippians who want to tell you, well, it's not that bad here. Well, it depends on who you ask. But if we're telling the truth, and if we're talking about movement, let's start with up. Ways Mississippi is going up. You guys are great students, awesome students, great athletes, so smart. Generation Z kids are hilarious and brilliant and talented. My little sister, I didn't know what a certain slang word was. And when she was in 7th grade, she made me a PowerPoint. And with T, a new slide would come up. With H, a new slide would come up. with an O and another T, a new slide would come up. And I learned something new that day. And it was problematic, and it was awful, and it was sexist. But these are the ways in which young people are learning. They have YouTube, they have Tumblr, they are woke, they understand imperialism, they have so much technology, and they are wonderful Mississippi public education students. But they all don't have the same opportunities, right? So on the right, let me move to my right. On the right, we have the efforts to improve education of charter schools, for instance, private school vouchers. And on the left, and you should never for any reason confuse a Democrat for a leftist, but just for the purpose of this rhetorical exercise, we have people in Mississippi who are trying extremely hard to get school funding and to have legislative accountability for the ways in which the students in Mississippi are educated, at least by how much money you spend on them. Because it's not all about money, but education requires some doubloons, and that's just the truth of it. And then, of course, down. I was at the Jackson Free Press from 2016 to January of this year. I was the Hechinger Report's Mississippi Education Reporting Fellow. It was my job to report on inequality and innovation in the state of Mississippi. When I left the JFP newsroom in January of this year, all the failing school districts in the state of Mississippi were majority Black. And then they had become, in this case of several pockets of schools, mostly Black and mostly brown, due to gifts from other countries. Immigrant children entering Mississippi public education classrooms and enriching the experiences that children have there, whether or not those school districts are prepared to enrich their experiences inside the classroom. The Mississippi Department of Education had been cowed by the GOP leadership in our state by refusing to honor the Title IX guidelines that the lifetime ago Obama administration set up in order to protect trans students and their right to use the bathrooms that fit their gender identity. And that's more than bathrooms. That's protecting them inside the classroom, too. Vouchers for special needs students could barely afford to send them to private schools because not only did they not cover full tuition, but those private schools did not, in many, many cases, have the ability to serve them for whatever needs that they had. And the best performing students in Mississippi were non-Hispanic Latino white girls who paid full price for lunch and didn't have IEPs. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is not feminism. That is not the definition of progress. The Annie E. Casey Foundation releases a report every year ranking the way that children in the United States grow up, not the consequences, I guess, but the circumstances of their birth, the outcomes of where they live. And Mississippi typically ranks dead last. To be fair, from the last Annie E. Casey Foundation study, Mississippians had improved somewhat, but Mississippi's children are still living in poverty. Too many of them live in poverty. Too many of them don't have access to health care. Too many of them don't have early childhood literacy access, despite the best efforts of the Mississippi Department of Education in order to provide that to them. You know, these kids are, like I said, they're beautiful, and they're smart, they're hilarious, and they deserve better than what the adults in the state of Mississippi give them. We have to be honest with ourselves about the privileges that we have. We can't be finger-wagging at people who are poor when we have the ability to pay tickets to SapsCollege to watch people do TED Talks. You know, they require so much more than what they've been given. They have known in their lifetime two presidents, Barack Hussein Obama, who despite his charm and warmth and Blackness still led an imperialist, white supremacist patriarchy, and Donald Trump, who is a mess. But, okay, so journalists have this really bad thing of joking about Donald Trump, but I will say with full seriousness, as a professional journalist, I do not have the right to talk to him about a friend that's just ridiculous that I get to brush aside like someone that you don't like in the cafeteria at school. He is a white supremacist, he is a xenophobe, and he is dangerous to all people of the United States of America. And that's the truth. The United States of America has to deal with not twin evils, but sibling evils of institutional racism and poverty. And until America does that, and until Mississippi does that, the students in Mississippi just will not get what it is that they deserve. I spent the last 10 months working for a story for the Center for Investigative Reporting on the way that Mississippi's public school students learn about the civil rights movement. Their textbooks are old. They mention James K. Vardaman, who was such a white supremacist way more often than they mention the freedom riders. They say that Martin Luther King Jr. gave a speech that made people excited. They barely mention women. And Mississippi public school students deserve better. They do not deserve the proliferation of charter schools as an idea that's an answer to bettering education, when in many respects, charter schools might not give students the education that they're hoping for, and also in many respects might serve as barriers even to integration in the state of Mississippi. So I say all that to say that Mississippi deserves better, and it's not going to move anywhere deep fast if it keeps using these superficial methods in order to say, hey, we're not as bad as everyone else. It's okay to be a mess, you know? Because well, not really, but you have to be honest with yourself, right? You don't know what to improve unless you acknowledge it. And until Mississippi acknowledges what it needs to do, it's not going to get better for these young people who deserve so much more than what they've been given so far. Thank you all so much for your time.